Hello everyone, today I'm going to be talking about the brand new game Desynced, which is available now on Steam. As I usually do when I first take a look at a game, I haven't watched any other videos, nor have I read any reviews or impressions or anything else, so that I can take a fresh look at the game and get my own opinion on it. That means that there may be some aspects of the game that I don't initially understand or that I don't get to. This is you can basically understand this as something that any other person might do, or how any other person might approach the game. But if you're watching this and you happen to know an area that I've gotten wrong, or something that I could do better, do let me know in the comments. So anyways, let's get to it. Desynced is an interesting new take on base building, resource gathering, management game. There's exploration and a story as well in the game, although I think the story element is relatively light, at least so far. Nothing like Tectonica, for example. More like the story that might be happening in Factorio. Actually, probably more than Factorio, because Factorio doesn't have that much of a story. Anyways, the obligatory comparison that comes to mind right away is Factorio, because you're gathering materials, you use them to create a manufacturing chain, and eventually, some end product, and that includes all of the structures and buildings that you put down. And it also has alien critters to shoot at, and will be attacking and storming your base as well. Additionally, this game does have multiplayer. From what I can tell, the multiplayer is both or either co-op or PvP, and which is rather interesting. I don't think there's necessarily that many of these games that where you can fight the other players, but I have not yet had a chance to look at this yet. So yeah, my initial plan had been to just play the game for a couple hours and then put out my impressions video, but I played it for 2 hours and I realized I was going to need a little more time to get any sort of a impression video out. So here I am after what Steam assures me was 8 hours of playtime, and definitely did not feel that long. And I do have some initial thoughts on the game. Overall, I found myself having a great time with the game. After playing for about an hour, I was already restarting because I realized my layout was terrible. And since then, I wanted to restart several times just to fix little things of how I was building the overall base. But I've resisted so that I can make some type of progress. But I think it's always a good sign in these games whenever I want to redo my initial setup, because it just means that there's depth there, that there's reasons why you might want to do it. And it just speaks to the flexibility and dynamicism of the game. Anyways, when you start the game, you are able to choose the location that you deploy your starting base to some degree. I mean, you can travel around and look for a better spot, basically, kind of like in Civilization. But most likely you're going to be right next to an area where you can just plop it down anyways. So I don't know that it's anything that we should be worrying about that much. There are the first two types of resources that you need are crystals and iron, and you can find those right away. They're plentiful all over the map, and there's other things like silicon sand. You can eventually see blight crystals. There's other resources available for collection that may come into the game later on. There's also ruins scattered around the surface. You can send a unit over to one and investigate it. Investigations are usually multi-step. They'll have a sort of a mini puzzle that you have to solve initially that will get you a reward, and then typically, from what I've seen, you have to feed a particular type of resource into it, and that will doing that will unlock the next reward. I've seen some that have 3 tiers. I've seen some that just have 2. It seems I've also run into some that require advanced materials that I'm not yet able to make. And the rewards have been anything from like some iron ingots to like an entire automated assembly component just ready to be plopped onto a base structure. So like it can really vary, I think. And any resource that you get is usually like welcome. Um, when you I found, at least initially, that the pace of the game is completely up to you. Um, because I was trying to figure out how things worked, and I was trying to keep my manufacturing expanding while troubleshooting various issues that I was having. I did neglect to do a lot of exploration, plus also I wasn't necessarily concentrating on exploring the map. But once I started to explore, the game immediately opened up like a new avenue of research when I stumbled onto like, uh, I guess, a particular feature of the world. Trying to not spoil it. And then, I think that exploration probably has a lot to do with why I haven't run into any aliens or bugs or anything hostile yet. So in my gameplay, at least 8 hours into it, it's been completely peaceful. I haven't had to use any weapons yet. And I suspect that that's because I haven't been exploring. So it seems likely that the pace of the game is just dictated by kind of how you play, which is great, because then it's always going to fit kind of what you are trying to do. If you want to go out and explore and maybe trigger the alien swarms, then you can go and do that. Or if you want to just take it easy and build up at home and then explore, then it seems like you can do that. But it doesn't, again, because once I started exploring, it opened up an avenue of research that had been closed previously. I suspect that that's going to be necessary to complete the game or to get to the highest tiers of manufacturing. I also discovered that the game map is huge. I have yet to fully explore it, even though I spent a little bit of time trying to uncover a lot of the fog of war. I haven't even reached one of the edges of the map yet. So that was kind of interesting. The map is not only it's not the only huge thing. The game itself seems to be quite large, even though it's in early access. There's clearly a lot of hours of gameplay if you want to delve into it. I've only scratched the surface, really, of the tech tree, for example. The tech tree is broken up into sections. Each section has its own set of technologies, and as I mentioned when I was exploring, this section opened up, and I imagine that there's probably some of these other ones that will open up later on as well. I don't know if it happens through exploration or through technology research. I guess we'll see as we get into it. I understand that there's both bugs and alien factions to find, to play with, but again, I haven't found them yet. There's an entire UI that's dedicated to building your own behavior programs for your robots. I took a look at it. It appears to be kind of intuitive on how to make a simple program, but it also seems to have a lot of complexity to it. I'm sure that people that can actually program things, not me, can make something decent out of it. I tried to just make a simple thing to have a miner go on mine, but I couldn't get mine to work. There seems to be no debugging errors or anything like that, so I couldn't tell exactly what was happening. I'm not sure if I didn't hook up the behavior component properly, or if there was something wrong with the way that I put the program together. I'm just not sure. Probably requires a bit of reading of the of the game codex, or possibly some research on the internet. Maybe somebody has already put together a video on how to do it. Yeah, no, that entire area looks really interesting. You have the ability to save and to import programs, it seems, so that I imagine that these will be a hot commodity in the workshop. As your base expands, you're going to have more and more logistic drones just carry resources back and forth various parts of your base. And I expect there's going to be a lot of trial and error on how to best get resources to flow properly around your base. In my experience, just building buildings too close to each other was causing robots to constantly bump into each other as they try to pick up and deliver resources. Spreading out the buildings helped a lot. I also noticed that robots are not completely filling out their inventory when they carry resources back and forth. They seem to only do one carry order at a time, so they will grab, X amount of resource Y and carry that to its destination, and then they will get their next assignment. So there might be room for improvement there with player creative logic behavior. I'm not sure, but you can create drones that have quite a large inventory, and so doing that seems like a complete waste of time on just logistic drones that are going to carry things around, because they just don't use it. Additionally, I was having a really frustrating problem where my mining robots would stop mining and they became transport robots. This seemed to happen if they became full and delivered their resource somewhere. Once their delivery was done, then they just kind of slot themselves into ferrying resources back and forth rather than go back to their original mining role. Because they're doing that, I had to spend a lot of time micromanaging the mining crew, making sure that mining was happening, because as soon as you stop getting resources in, your entire factory grinds to a halt. So this was a really aggravating problem. It's probably the worst thing that's happening in the demo as far as I'm concerned, and I could see this problem alone turning a lot of people off of playing it, because you do have to spend a lot of time grabbing miners that are just delivering resources around your base and then getting them to go back to mine. Yeah, it was really frustrating. Another minor detail that was bothering me are the sound effects for the game. They're a little bit of a miss for me. I know it's not gonna be an issue for a lot of people. For some people it may be a big issue. For me, it's not a huge issue, but it's something that I noticed. But there's stuff like the mining lasers that when you listen to them, it actually sounds more like a combat laser. I think it's not necessarily the game's fault in this case, really. It's just that I think there's a ton of other games that I've spent a lot of time training my brain to think of sounds like these as combat sounds. And so when I hear it coming out of a mining laser, it just sounds a bit weird. That's just my take on it. Also, the other thing that was a bit distracting is that as you move around the base, you'll hear all kinds of equipment and stuff like that going on, but I wasn't able to visually marry the sound I was hearing to what I was seeing on screen. So there's like this sort of weird disconnect where you're hearing a bunch of stuff, you can't really tell where it's coming from. It doesn't necessarily seem to be coming from the stuff you have on screen, and that was a bit strange. Like you might hear like a pumping sound and you're looking around and there's nothing that seems like a piston that's moving up or down or anything like that. So just stuff like that. It's kind of a minor thing. I just noticed it and just ignored it after that. But for some people it may be more distracting. The last thing I wanted to talk about really was the look of the game. I find the look is great. I feel that they did a great job making the various modular pieces look great together, even when you mix and match them in different ways. I love looking around the base, being able to tell what's stored where just by looking around, and you can just see the object in its slot. There's a couple of exceptions for some things that seem to be using the same model. I don't know if that's going to stay like that or if there's plans to change the model later. Um, but there is a weird little artifact where, especially when you zoom in, where some things are crisp and others are out of focus, and it doesn't seem to have anything to do with the center of the screen. I'm not really sure what the deal is there. There may be something you can play with in the options to change it, but I haven't gotten around to doing that. But it can be a little bit distracting if you're trying to zoom in and look at something and it's just out of focus. It's kind of weird. Because it doesn't look like it needs to be. It looks like you can certainly get it a lot crisper. Because some parts of the screen look okay. Anyways, just not to ramble forever. My final thoughts on Desynced overall. I think that if you like Factorio, then this game probably deserves at least a look. If you like to tinker with your base layout to try to find an optimal layout that works for you, this game definitely serves for that. I was having a lot of fun just trying to figure out how to best build things. There's lots of different approaches to things from what I can tell. So yeah, I think it's great that way. I think it's probably just going to get better as I imagine as the game comes out of early access eventually. If you like the combat aspect of Factorio, I think this probably fits right in. If you didn't like the combat aspect, if you preferred more something like Satisfactory, where your buildings aren't going to get destroyed and stuff like that, then this might not be for you, because that part of the game seems like it's built into it and probably can't be separated very well from the rest of it. That said, the devs might come up with a peaceful game mode eventually, but right now I don't think there is one. There are some options you can toggle to get rid of hostiles in the initial game setup, so maybe that works. But like I said, it seemed like some of the research might have to do with exploring and combat, so I'm not completely sure on how that works. But it does seem like there might be some level of option there if you want to avoid combat entirely. Anyways, those have been my thoughts on the game. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one, guys.